Hey brewers, welcome back to Iconoclast Brewing. I will never use Fermcap-S again. I had a thought the other day, what exactly is Fermcap-S? I know it's made of silicone, but there's got to be more to it than that. And is it really safe to put in our beer? So today we're diving into this controversial topic that demands our attention as responsible brewers. If you're using this stuff, there are some things you should know, including the effects of Fermcap-S on white blood cells. So let's go. I'm going to take you on a deep dive into anti-foam agents, what they are, why and how to use them, and why this anti-foaming agent deep dive turned out to be way more interesting than I could have ever imagined. Stick around to the end because I will be sharing some eye-opening studies about silicone-based anti-foaming agents like Fermcap-S and offering you some alternative options so you can make an informed decision about your own brewery. Okay, so let's get into this. I was brewing with my club at a commercial brewery the other day, and the owner of the brewery pulled out a big bottle of anti-foaming agent. I didn't know this at the time, but he was about to drop a huge knowledge bomb, and I was totally unprepared for it. He asked us, how many of you are using Fermcap-S in your beer? Most of us raised our hands. I'm pretty sure anyone who's ever experienced a boil over or a fermenter exploding on their ceiling is probably also using Fermcap-S at this point. After all, it totally prevents boilovers and keeps krausen from becoming overly active during primary fermentation. Let's just say I haven't needed a blow off in years, which is great. So anyways, what the owner of the brewery said next really got me thinking about other additives I use in brewing and whether they're safe or not. He looked at me and said, there's a reason why many pros do not use Fermcap-S. There's a strict limit set by the FDA on the parts per millionth of active silicone in finished beer. And they even go as far to say that the beer should be filtered using something like diatomaceous earth and a sheet filter or centrifuged before it can be packaged. I don't know about you guys, but I do not have a centrifuge in my garage. Okay, so let's step back for a moment. Let's talk about what Fermcap is made from, how it works, and then in a moment talk about why anti-foaming agents are super beneficial process-wise. So Fermcap-S is a silicone-based emulsion that works by breaking surface tension. The main ingredient here is polydimethylsiloxane, or PDMS, which we're going to call it from here on out, because I feel like I'm going to drool if I keep saying that word. So PDMS is insoluble in water, so it doesn't mix with the wort like other compounds might. Instead, it creates a barrier at the liquid-gas interface, which is really just a fancy way of saying at the surface of the bubbles. And it causes a few different things to happen. One, it causes a reduction in surface tension. Two, it causes disruption of foam structure. And finally, the dispersal of bubbles, which is really what we're after. It reduces surface tension by spreading over the surface of the wort and foam, and its low surface energy allows it to thin and rupture bubble walls. Okay, so what are the reasons for using anti-foaming agents? First, of course, is to reduce the likelihood of the dreaded boilover, or some insane krausen action in primary fermentation. But the real reason many pros use anti-foaming agents, and homebrewers can benefit from this too, is the increase in throughput. In other words, being able to squeeze more wort into the fermenter. And this is because you don't have to worry about the krausen taking up all that room. So according to Dana Johnson, we're talking about up to 30% increase in throughput. That's pretty significant. And if you don't really care about that, you're thinking, if I want more volume, I'll just get a bigger fermenter. Okay, then how about this tidbit from Dana Johnson at Burco Corporation? You have several things working against you when you do not use anti-foaming agents. And this is pretty much a direct quote from the article linked in the description. If you're using a top fermenting yeast, you're going to lose that when the krausen pushes itself out through the blow-off tube, which means the remaining yeast is going to have to work a lot harder and could result in off flavors. It could also result in falling short on attenuation. Next, hydrophobic proteins can be expelled, and this leads to a decrease in head retention in the final beer. So that's bad news for your foam. And interestingly, hop bitterness, both measured and perceived, can be lost in foam that's pushed out of the fermenter, decreasing the IBUs in the finished beer. Finally, in the kettle, when there's significant foaming, or hopefully not, but a boil over, hops will either be pushed out of the kettle altogether, or they will just rise and stick to the wall, where they can no longer be isomerized by the boiling wort. So this reduces your IBUs as well. So it would seem while anti-foaming agents do reduce foam, the opposite appears to be true for the finished beer. It'll actually help your foam. So let's get back to the core of this topic. First, we're going to talk about where PDMS shows up in other substances and how Fermcap relates to farts. And yes, you heard me correctly. And on a less light note, I'll share some of the rather disturbing findings of some peer-reviewed studies that made me think twice about using Fermcap-S ever again. First, what's really interesting, and I found this both on a Brewlosophy post linked in the description, as well as the ingredients labeling. Gas X also uses PDMS as the primary active ingredient. That's right. Apparently, we use anti-foaming agents to control farts. And the FDA set this limit for food additives. Apparently, the same standards do not apply to pharmaceuticals. After looking into this, I found that PDMS is not able to be absorbed into the bloodstream and just passes through your GI tract quickly and largely unchanged. This is where I got really confused. That's because of the severe discrepancies between the FDA limits in food versus medicinal applications. So I put 2 and 2 together here. This is probably because the FDA is looking at least several elements. The first is reducing exposure across a variety of intake methods. In other words, they don't want you taking this stuff regularly every day from foods, drinks, and medications. They figure you're probably not going to be taking Gas X every day for your whole life forever. But if you're getting it from multiple sources, that may go well beyond what testing has shown in long-term studies. The second reason, and this is true for most medications, is that the benefit likely outweighs the risks of taking the medication. Still, I'm really bothered that the FDA has not stated why these limits are in place, for beer in particular. It almost seems like yet another string of red tape for brewers, of which we have no short supply. Okay, so now that we talked about what Fermcap is, what are the concerns with using Fermcap-S? Primarily, the concerns come from statements from the FDA and from a source that I found, which is Brewers Corporation. Brewers Corporation produces a variety of anti-foaming agents, cleaners, and things like that. So Brewers summarized the FDA statement pretty well. They said brewers should not use silicone containing anti-foam for unfiltered beers. The FDA allows active silicone to be used up to 10 parts per millionth, but stipulates that the silicone must be removed prior to packaging by either filtration or through a centrifuge. There's a great article, which I'll link to in the description, by Burko that talks about all things anti-foam agents. So it's kind of crazy. It doesn't take much Fermcap-S to exceed this limit of 10 parts per millionth. I don't know about you guys, but I like to keep my beer as natural as I possibly can. Now, like I said, I did find some studies that suggest not so great news. One of which was written by a journal called Proceedings of the Zoological Society. This was looking at PDMS and toxicity in human lymphocytes. And it aimed to see if PDMS could harm human cells by testing it on white blood cells. They exposed these cells to different amounts of PDMS, from 0 to 20 parts per millionth, and then observed the effects over 24 hours. They found that at 2.5 parts per millionth or higher, the cells started to actually die more frequently. At 20 parts per millionth, 50% of those cells died. But that's not all. At concentrations of 2.5 parts per millionth and above, PDMS also damaged the cell's DNA, meaning it could potentially lead to mutations or other genetic problems. And listen, take this with a grain of salt, because it is a single study I'm talking about here. And as I mentioned before, other studies do mention that PDMS leaves the body quickly through the GI tract with little to no absorption if ingested through the mouth. And because it does not enter the bloodstream, would not have any opportunity to cause mutations or other issues or kill white blood cells. So in other words, exposing PDMS to cells directly would definitely not mimic how they would act in the actual body. Still, I don't personally like the idea of putting this in my body over the long term, because the previous part of that statement that was key to me is the fact that little to no PDMS can be absorbed into the bloodstream. Even a little of this stuff would be too much for me. So if you feel the same, here's what you can do to avoid using Fermcap-S and still get some of the benefits of anti-foaming. And keep in mind, this is definitely one of those times where it is up to you as a brewer to decide your path forward. So the first option for anti-foaming agents as an alternative to Fermcap-S is Fermcap-AT. This is probably the most logical choice. And it's one that many pro brewers will use, knowing that there may be safety issues with Fermcap-S. And this is because Fermcap AT is unable to be detected in finished beer, even though the tools used to measure this are accurate to 0.0005 parts per millionth. This already has me feeling better. I've already ordered my Fermcap AT at this point. The only drawback for Fermcap AT is it's kind of hard to come by. So the next option is a canola oil-based anti-foaming agent. This is another option, and this one's offered actually by Burco Corporation. I found it while I was researching the topic. And it's definitely the most natural additive that you can use for anti-foaming. It is worth mentioning it does affect mouthfeel a bit, according to their website. It can make it feel a little more slick. So definitely a heavier mouthfeel, which is not always what you want. However, they also claim that yeast counts in beer using canola oil-based anti-foaming agents is increased. Okay, so this next one I definitely credit to Brewlosophy, particularly Marshall, who states that he now uses about 3 to 5 drops per 5-gallon batch. And this does the trick for him. So it may be a case of don't change anything, just use less Fermcap-S, and you feel better about that. That's up to you. And the final option is really just go old school. I mean, when I started brewing, I didn't really know about Fermcap-S. And we used to just spray the foam with some cold water. And that did a pretty good job. But you definitely had to babysit that kettle. So you can do that. You can spray down the foam. You can adjust your boil so it's not too vigorous. If you do get the wort rising up using this method, make sure you're just pushing those hops back down into the wort as they get stuck to the kettle walls. And unfortunately, during primary fermentation, there's not really going to be a way for you to prevent IBUs from being lost through foam getting pushed out. But that is something you might accept, especially if you're trying to honor German purity laws. So there you have it, folks. This was quite a journey for me, and I really hope you got something out of it. I know I did. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the new content I have coming out, which I try to post at least once a week. Let us know in the comments what you thought about this and if you have any other methods for controlling foam. I'll see you in the next one, and never stop learning.